Everyone, it's Kirsty, and you know me usually as the person that solves crime using astrology. Today I'm going to do a fairly short lesson on the 11th house in general. The reason why I'm jumping to the 11th house is it seems to be one of the most elusive houses to understand in astrology. So I wanted to go through a whole bunch of things so we could get a really good understanding, a deep understanding of the 11th house. Then I'm going to backtrack and cover all the rest of the houses for those that have been waiting patiently. I'm going to read from a few sources, and one of them is Howard Sasportis, the 12 houses, understanding the importance of the houses in your astrological birth chart. It is one of the best books ever, and I highly recommend it. It'll be in my description, but here's just some words from it. So the 11th house, at its deepest level, the 11th house, which is associated with the sign of Aquarius, that's the natural rulership of the 11th house here, and co-ruled by Saturn. So Saturn is the traditional ruler of the 11th house, and Uranus is the modern ruler. So at its deepest level, the 11th house represents the attempt to go beyond our ego identity, and our ego identity is the exact opposite of the 11th, which is the 5th. That's our ego and our identity. So we're always talking about an opposite, our ego, and become something greater than what we already are. The main way of achieving this is to identify with something larger than ourselves, such as a circle of friends, a group, or a belief system, or an ideology. So that is the crux of what the 11th house is, and as the opposition of the 5th house naturally. As you'll see in this chart here, there's the 11th house. It has Venus in it. Opposite is the 5th house, and it's empty. The 4th house has a lot there. So it's always important to look at the dynamics between both houses. So in this case, the 11th and the 5th. So as I said, the 5th is the ego identity, and then the 11th is wanting to become greater than that and a part of something else. And the way it relates to Uranus is that it's on a higher level. It's a higher level thinking. It's frogs have decided to take over again. So because of the dual rulership of it with Saturn and Uranus, the concept of group consciousness implied by the 11th house can be understood in two distinctly different ways. Saturn seeks greater security and a more solid sense of identity through belonging to a group, or psychologists label that belonging identification. Being a member of a particular group, whether it is a social, national, political, or religious group. Religious really is more the 9th house, but well, that's churches, and anyway. Enhances the self of who we are and gives a feeling of safety in numbers. To some extent, this is exploitive, since the rest of the world is used in the service of augmenting or bolstering the identity. Evidence of this is most clearly seen in those who are overly concerned with having the right friends, being noticed in the right places, and aligning themselves with the right, quote-unquote, right beliefs. The negative face of this Saturn undercurrent of the 11th house manifests when a group is threatened by another group. So it's to opposing group ideas. Now, the Uranian side of the 11th represents the kind of group consciousness with spiritual teachers and visionaries and different cultures and different mystical perceptions of the unity of all life. So in the 5th house here, our energy is used to distinguish ourselves from other people and to augment the sense of our own individual worth and specialness. In the 11th house, which is opposite, the energy can be invested in promoting and fulfilling the identity, purpose and cause of any group to which we belong. Whether this is understood to be the whole human race or a particular segment of it is either or. In the 5th, we do want what we want to do for our own sake. Of course, we do what we want to do for our own sake. And in the 11th, we may choose to relinquish or compromise some of these personal urges and inclinations for the sake of adhering to what the group decides is best. So when we're talking about criminal astrology, the 5th and the 11th house is where you start to look, 11th house especially, for cult behaviour and things like that, or people that are kidnapped and taken into a cult. That's that type of thing, that group mentality. In some cases, placements in the 11th house might show us that the sorts of groups towards which we gravitate towards. So, for example, if Neptune was in the 11th house, then you might be interested in musical societies or psychic groups or social media. No, not with Neptune. If Mercury's there, you might be interested in social media groups or Gemini or etc. Rather than just describing the type of group, though, it's more likely that signs and planets in the 11th house symbolize your style of behaving and interacting in group situations. So friendship fits into the 11th house ideal of becoming greater than what we already are, because people are linked together through friendship and personal boundaries are then expanded, and both the needs and resources of others become interwoven with our own. We introduce our friends to new ideas and interests, and likewise we do the same and are broadened by what they bring to us and share with us. So planets and signs in the 11th house often describe the kinds of friends whom we gravitate towards. For example, a person with Mars in the 11th may be attracted to people who exhibit Martian type qualities such as directness and high drive and are a bit loud. However, placements in the 11th might also show qualities in ourselves which we disown and project outwardly and meet externally through friends or through a mirror is another way of saying that. So that's an interesting thing, a way to think about it. The 11th house also suggests the way in which we make friends. So if Mars is in there or Aries is on the cusp, we could rush into friendships. Saturn on the cusp or in there in the 11th is more awkward and shy. So they colour what happens. If Venus is in there, you tend to make friends more easily. Pluto, if that was in there, then friendships become intense and complicated. So yeah, there's all different ways that the 11th house act, obviously, but generally you need to remember the polarity between the 5th house of self and the 11th of others. And the other thing that this has been labelled is hopes and goals and wishes, which is pretty broad, but it's the desire to become something greater than we are. And it has to be accompanied by the capacity to envisage new and different possibilities, which is a Uranian thing. So we have to evolve and learn and imagine new things. So there you go. There's a whole 11th house lesson in 10 minutes. Talk to you soon.